In episode number 408 of the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, we cover Marvel's plans for their free comic book day titles.
We also have DC Comics' departure from Diamond Distributors.
We discuss one of the latest trades with Green Lantern by Geoff Johns Volume 3.
All of this and so much more on today's show.
Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I am Pokemon breeder Daniel.
And I am your Emperor Kelli.
For those of you new to the podcast, first we go through some news. Sometimes it'll be very comic-based like this week, and sometimes it'll be heavy on the DCEU. We've got some of that here too. But then we go into our Patreon shoutouts of the week, which are our thank yous to everyone who make the show possible. We end it with a comic book review. This week it is that Geoff Johns Omnibus. And finally, we close things out with the Brocat Block, which is where Kelli and I have been this week.
Kicking it off with some DCEU news, though, in an interview with Premiere Magazine, Wonder Woman 1984 director Patty Jenkins revealed that she was offered a Justice League movie, but turned it down.
The quote from Patty reads, quote, "I don't really care about shared universes, continuity, and that kind of detail. I've been contacted to make a Justice League movie in the past, and it doesn't connect to me. Too many characters," end quote.
We didn't get any further details as far as whether this was the Justice League reshoots that Joey Whedon ended up doing or an entirely new Justice League project.
Right now, Wonder Woman 1984 is set to release on August 14th. Now, a lot of people took this, especially with the lack of public support over Zack and the Zack Snyder's Justice League, as her saying, kind of confirming that she doesn't have too much regard over the character fitting into Zack's vision of the DCEU, mainly including the fact that in 1984, she does not use her sword and shield like she did in the first film, and does not kill in the way that Zack's version of her did. And that this is her completely disregarding that continuity, and this is her kind of saying that in the same way. So kind of fitting that narrative that they were sort of putting out there, that she wasn't on board with Zack's vision of these characters. Do you think this kind of confirms all of that?
A little bit. It's kind of a way to say that without outright saying, I don't like what he did with her, so I did my own thing.
And with Justice League, at least what we got her using her sword and her shield again in that film. So it's once again not really gelling with what's going on in 1984. Now, we haven't seen that movie. We don't know if it ends with her needing to use higher or heavier weapons again. And it could just be its own standalone thing, much like Aquaman was, where even they kind of retold how he gets his armor and that, so it didn't fit with Zack's vision. And I think Wonder Woman this sequel is going to be another one of those products of Wonder Woman changing things up. Warner Brothers changing things up, not wanting things to fit into that timeline. Now, we know that AT&T completely changed all of that with the return and confirmation of Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is amazing and it's very exciting, but we don't know what that end result is going to be yet. It's still way too early to tell, but I think at least we know that Wonder Woman 1984 is going to fit more in line with what Aquaman or Shazam were.
It's unfortunate that it went this route where they don't all perfectly mesh together, but at the same time, right, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman, and yeah, even though maybe it doesn't directly follow him, maybe this one won't, I have high hopes that I'll enjoy this one as well. I also liked Aquaman, equally. I won't say as much as Wonder Woman. I definitely like Wonder Woman more, but I did like Aquaman, and I know we had talked about at one point, I don't have any blame on these directors for changing it. They had their own vision, and once they said, okay, you don't need to keep it in line with the direction this thing is going, yeah, of course they're going to change it to really fit what they wanted it to be. I don't think it's right of her to come out and just be like, I don't care about continuity. They offered and I said no. Like, that makes her sound kind of stuck up, and I know that probably wasn't the direction she was trying to go.
Do you think that this was an entirely new Justice League film, or do you think these were those reshoots that Joey Whedon ended up getting?
It's really hard for me to say. I don't know. I don't know if maybe they came to her first for the Justice League film and she turned it down. And then they said, okay, well, what about Wonder Woman? And then offered it to Snyder. I mean, I really don't know. I would like to think that it was an entirely new one because I feel even she would have been better than Joey Whedon with the reshoots. But then at the same time, maybe if she had done that, then we wouldn't be getting Snyder's actual vision right now. So I'm happy with where the world is. I think she's kind of bitter about some things with that she's posting, but I'm, things worked out the way that they were supposed to, and at least we're getting Snyder's cut.
Yeah, I lean more on the camp of maybe she was going to get hired to do these reshoots instead because Wonder Woman was such a success for the studio and for the DC Extended Universe that maybe they wanted her to handle that Justice League film. And we'll talk about it later in the Brocat block, but I watched Justice League for the second time. And the first time was in theaters, and I haven't seen it since. But I watched it for the second time yesterday, and I noticed that the rewrites and the reshoots definitely put Wonder Woman more in focus in front of the team, rather than, I don't know what else they were going to make or what Zack's plans were. But it was deliberately done so that, oh, yeah, that Wonder Woman film did good. Let's write in some other things that fit in with that film, because we know people like that thing. So I think because of that, because she was such a focus in the reshoots, that makes me think that maybe Patty was approached first. But regardless, as you said, and I will have a lot to say when we get to Justice League at the end, but I don't expect Patty to come back for a third one if they end up going in the direction of Zack Snyder's Justice League, if that ends up being the success that we expect it to be.
Is there really any question that Snyder's Justice League is going to be a success?
No, I don't think so. Not the way we've been pushing it. And we know that we're going to be, once they make that Blu-ray or 4K of this series or movie or however they end up putting this together, we're going to be buying multiple copies. And we're already subbing to HBO Max. It's like the representative was saying, that it's already a success based on all of the publicity and attention that it's gotten, that AT&T and HBO Max have gotten. So they already consider it a success before it even releases, which is a huge positive.
It is, and we're so excited. I'm so excited for where the world is going, but something that is not a positive, and it does involve your sweet darling HBO Max. Several DC films are leaving HBO Max at the end of the month due to previous streaming deals, but services already outlined that these will return on the platform.
You can find these titles on the Last Chance category. And as you mentioned, there were previous streaming deals already in place before HBO Max launched. These are multi-year streaming deals that they see. And obviously, not all of them were going to fall and end perfectly when they planned on launching HBO Max.
What do you mean? They've done everything else perfectly.
That's true. But with them saying that these are all going to, they already ahead of time, they're like, no, these are all coming back. Don't worry about it. It's all part of these previous streaming deals. And yes, at the end of the month, you should watch them, but we're already getting more next month and in August.
Which one is a have to watch before it goes away? If you could tell the Broquettes, you have to watch this by the end of the month.
Assuming they haven't seen any of these, I'd have to look at the full list of the DC films leaving, but if I had to just keep it at the current slate of DC films, it would be Man of Steel is the one I would say if they, for some reason, haven't seen it. If they're a Broquette and they haven't seen Man of Steel, it's like they must have accidentally discovered this podcast. But otherwise, the Dark Knight trilogy, for sure, before that. And I don't know which animated films they have on there. And I know Killing Joke is on there too. But I think the Nolan trilogy, Man of Steel, for sure. If I could only have to pick one, it'd be Man of Steel, Batman Begins from that trilogy. So there's a lot of good stuff. But a new set of titles is going to come in July next month and August. I think one of them is the Ultimate Edition of Batman v Superman. So you're already going to get that at least with the better version of the two.
Yeah, it's already getting better.
So I think it's awesome. And we see that with all the streaming services. We saw that with Netflix recently with the Turtles films, and those are now on HBO Max.
Oh, you know what HBO has that Netflix got rid of?
What did they pick up?
Friends.
Yeah, that's a huge get.
People were so mad when it was leaving Netflix, but now you can just get HBO Max and watch it there.
They're doing the same with The Office next year.
Oh,
and I
really?
know Seinfeld is going to leave Hulu as well next year.
And go to HBO Max?
I don't know where they're going.
Oh,
no.
I was about to say, HBO's like, nom, 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 nom.
I know The Office is going on the CBS's streaming service or NBC's, whatever it is.
That makes sense.
But I don't know where Seinfeld is going.
It would make sense to go on HBO because they already have Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Or Netflix. I mean, they have a lot of deals in place already with Jerry on there. But you're right, with Larry David on that end, it would depend on who really controls most of that deal, which network has it, and where they want to see it, or who's going to pay more, really. Because it's fucking Seinfeld, one of the greatest shows of all time.
You love that show. You even send, I see your tweets all the time. Like, if this was a Seinfeld episode.
Those are great. Modern day Seinfeld.
Oh my God. What would they do with the coronavirus?
It's always involving Kramer. Yes. He would
course.
have a scheme about masks, and it would probably go in place with the male bra. There would be some kind of resurrection of that. But with male masks, he would make it for men. I don't know. It's Kramer. He would figure out something. Moving over to the comic book side of things, Marvel has announced that it is allowing retailers to give away their free comic book day titles on July 15th.
There's no word yet from other publishers or Diamond for an official free comic book day event, but I mean, this is better than nothing, right?
They're kind of moving ahead with, look, if you're not going to announce a release date or a date for these, you can start giving them away on this day. Here's when they're going to start shipping the rest of them. So it is a bit of a mess, to be honest with you, but I know that Marvel's is going to be a big enough draw where I think we can make this into a mini free comic book day. And it is coming up quick, July 15th, and I've been out of the store for a week, and I'll explain why in a minute. But with that, it is, I don't know what the plans are going to be from Diamond, even if they're going to support this at all, or if they're just going to send the books and say, hey, retailers, it's up to you guys, but we're going to be setting this up with the rest of the publishers for this later date. The other problem is DC's books. How are those going to be distributed now? Because we still haven't gotten the full allocation of those free comic book day books. And with them leaving Diamond, I have no idea if that affects that at all.
I'm about to blow your mind. I'm going to be the best marketing manager that doesn't get paid from your store ever.
Let's hear it.
You're going to call this a marvelous free comic book day. And you're just going to have Marvel books.
All right. I'll run it past them.
He's probably going to be like, that's stupid. Just call it free comic book day.
It works. It's in there, though. Free comic book day.
Right. But it's got to be Marvel dash us.
Yeah. I got it. DC Comics, as I mentioned, has fully ended its decades-long relationship with Diamond Distributors, with final books coming in on June 23rd. So there was a lot of rumors about this, and DC kept reassuring Diamond and telling them that, no, we need this other date. We'll tell you when we're going to renegotiate or renew, and they just kept pushing it back, but they didn't give anyone a heads up. We found out the same time as Diamond and the rest of the retailers. There was no heads up on this. And DC has been doing this every Friday over the last couple of weeks, where they'll give a new update on new titles or new solicitations, or, for example, their Lunar distribution that happened like a month or two ago. But now every Friday, they seem to be giving out the next step of their plan. And this was a huge one to fully leave Diamond.
We have some quotes here about this, and I would love for us to get through that, and then maybe you and I can dive a little deeper into our thoughts and feelings.
Sure.
But the first quote comes from a DC spokesperson who said, quote, moving forward, comic book retailers can obtain their DC books from Penguin Random House or their books and periodicals through Lunar or UCS comic book distributors. DC continues to be committed to providing the direct market with the best-in-class service and the fans with the world's greatest comic books, end quote.
We have a statement from Diamond founder and chairman of Geppi Enterprises, also Gotham resident Steve Geppi, who said, quote, today, DC sent out a retailer communication indicating they are ending their long-standing relationship with Diamond. In April, we were informed that DC was going to begin distributing products through additional partners. At that time, they asked us to submit a proposal for a revised agreement with the understanding that Diamond would continue to be one of their distributors, which we promptly did. They then requested an extension to June 30th, which we also accommodated. Last week, DC requested an additional extension through July. We responded with questions, and DC indicated they would reply today, June 5th. Instead of receiving a response, today we received a termination notice. While we had anticipated this as a possible outcome, we, like so many others in the industry, are disappointed by their decision to end the partnership so abruptly at this time, end quote.
I guess he made an offer that they could refuse.
It'd be a shame if a bunch of their books suddenly went missing.
Whole tankers sinking. Should be a shame if they found some drugs in with those books.
Hope they aren't smuggling anything that would ruin their whole enterprise. Steve, what are you implying? Nothing. I wish them the best. We have retailer reactions as well. This first one comes from J.C. Glinmeyer, owner of Earthworld Comics in Albany, New York. And this is their quote on Friday's Surprise News.
Quote, "It was a nice gut punch after we just reopened our doors for the first time in 2 months. As most retailers, I'm not going to cut off my nose to spite my face. I'll order for my regulars, the minimum for racks, but I'm not putting any significant resources into their future projects," end quote.
Another retailer quote from Ben Ray of Atomic Comic Books in Baltimore. Quote, "The timing of this is terrible and shows a blatant disregard for concerns of comic sellers. So I say this as a lifelong DC Comics fan as well as a retailer. Screw you, DC Comics. I wish them every bit as well as Marvel did when they did this back in the 90s, end quote. It's probably the most bitter one so far.
Definitely. I'm a fan, but fuck you.
Yeah.
Our final quote here comes from Ryan Seymour of Comic Town in Columbus, Ohio, who said, quote, "It might be petty, but I am not thrilled about my two biggest online competitors now profiting off of me. Having to buy books from companies that are already been selling books to guests for nearly half off is not something that sits well with me at all," end quote.
So my reactions as a retailer myself, and again, I haven't been in the shop in a week. We went on vacation and we went a little bit out of town, so we'll go into that in the Brocat block, but I have been trying to keep up with what people have been saying on Twitter and Instagram and on other podcasts that I listen to. And there's a lot of bitterness from retailers that did not jump on board with Lunar or UCS right away, which are the two new distributors that DC Comics is going through instead. The biggest issue here, and this is where I personally have my biggest problem, and I discussed this a few weeks back when we said this is why our shop isn't going with these two distributors, is that they're owned by some online competitors. So essentially the Amazon of comic books, which is Discount Books or whatever. I don't shop on it, so I don't remember what it's called, and I'm not going to look it up to give them pub either. But now they're earning a portion of every book that we buy, every single issue that we buy. And that, I think, is a huge problem. It'd be like Barnes & Noble having to buy books through a company that Amazon owns, and Amazon is then making a profit of it. So I see a huge problem with that, and I don't like that. I'm not as concerned about them knowing what our numbers are, because DC can get that at any point. They've had those numbers for years. So that I'm not concerned with, and I don't know where that problem comes with, or a lot of that worry comes from retailers, and maybe I'd have to talk to more retailers to see why that's the issue. But I guess my main concern is that every dollar that we now spend, a portion of that is going to these competitors. And yeah, they're not I wouldn't say they're direct competitors in a way of, well, if they don't get it from me, they're going to get it from them, or people are back and forth between the two. That's not the problem. The problem is that they're going to keep existing now because through comic shops, through comic stores everywhere, because of DC.
My stance still is and will continue to be, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. Realistically, you don't end a decades-long partnership with a distributor just because. You just don't. And I get that there's been a lot going on in DC and a lot of changes with leadership. I definitely see all of that, and maybe things were brought to light about this that we didn't know. And I'm hoping they made the right decision. I'm hoping that this is ultimately, at the end of it all, the best thing for comic shops, the best thing for DC. And I get that it sucks now, and there's a lot of, I almost want to say, taking it personally, right? How could they do this to us? How could they, impact us in this way to make our job a little bit harder? But until they or Diamond officially release a statement that says, yeah, here's what really went on behind the scenes, you don't get as big as DC is, and by just doing shitty things, by just making these changes on a dime. And I really think Diamond was doing, I'm going to stick by my mobster, right? But even if it wasn't anything mob related. They were doing something or wrote something into the contract as quickly as they were turning that back around and sending it to DC that just didn't sit right with DC.
I know one of the things that DC had them put into the contract, I think they said a year and a half ago when they renewed their contract, was there was a clause in there that they had the option to fully separate from Diamond if books could not be fulfilled for a period. And that's when it happened with COVID-19. There was the closures, and they found that was their opportunity to go, all right, let's break out of this contract. And I'm sure maybe it was a shorter term one if they had them write that in there, because obviously their plan, whether it was during this closure or later after this contract ended, was to eventually break away from Diamond and go with these other distributors. And I know one of the chair people from Lunar, I think, they had said that they weren't prepared to do this and they weren't anticipating to do this, but you don't turn this kind of deal down.
Of course not.
To become a distributor. And they're not in the, and they said themselves, they're not in the business of distributing comics, but it's a huge business opportunity. So now there's a lot of growing that is forced to happen because of this move. So I know they're scrambling, they're stressed out about this. And sure enough, we are as well. I know on the back end of things, from talking as a retailer and anyone that knows what shop I work at, I'm not speaking for that company. I'm only speaking from myself and the books I order for that particular store, is I now have to, it is double the work when I do the reorders now on Mondays for the final order cutoffs, and then the reorders on when I do them on Sundays. So I'm going to have to go through Diamond, send them their list for all the other publishers, and then I'm going to have to go through whatever distributors we go through, one of which is going to be Penguin, and then the other one is going to be either Lunar or UCS or ECS, whatever they're calling it. And that's going to be for the single issue. So Penguin for the trades and hardcovers. And then, so there's now 3 different distributors that I'm going to have to email every week, that I'm going to have to work with every week. And the system itself is built for Diamond and the books we sell through the register, not through the other distributors either. So that's going to be another process. Those bits I understand those are changes that are going to happen, and I've accepted that. And some of that is going to get easier a year from now when I already have everything's worked out and ironed out. Fine, so be it. But the other thing I've been seeing from other retailers, and we read one of those quotes, was they're going to stick it to DC by ordering small and not promoting DC as much. And I've seen that a lot in other stores where they're like, all right, we're going to push the retailers that do have comic shops in mind, that aren't going to go with distributors that are out to put comic stores out of business. Although with us working with them, now there's an interest, of course, right, between the two of us for us to keep going and keep existing and keep helping each other out. So there's also that side of the coin. But the problem is, and I heard this on Word Balloon, is customers and readers and most of our subscribers and comic readers don't know about any of this that's happening and don't really care. And something I heard is someone doesn't care if Spawn is done by Image or Marvel or DC. They just want their Spawn book. And that's going to be the case with all of this. So some of these retailers that are cutting down on their orders, and I get that they're more expensive now. That's the other problem. Now our profit margins are even lower through DC for the DC books, and that sucks. That's a huge money loss that all comic shops are now taking, and I get that that's a reality. But to then punish the comic reader by under ordering just to stick it to DC to send the message, I think it hurts the shop in the profits, and it also hurts the readers, who most of which don't care about any of the back end stuff. They just want to buy the books that they want to buy.
Right. You're going to under order, and then they're just going to go to a different shop that didn't under order.
Or they're going to go online to these retailers that are the competitors, and that's, you're going to leave money on the table in that way. So that's the only thing I will say that I don't agree with, and I understand why they want to do that, and I understand the message they want to send, but I don't think that's the way to go about it personally. That all being said, any Brokettes that do have a subscription through their store, and maybe they're at a shop that is going to take that initiative and instead under order DC, that gives you more of a I say, if you're able to, tell your store way ahead of, not the week before a DC book releases or a book releases, because numbers are already in, but months ahead of time. If you are interested in a book, add it to your subscription. Don't just pick up issues 1 and then, I'll pick up 2 when that comes out. I'll pick up 3. No, add it to your sub, remove it later if you don't like it, because a lot of shops now, not mine, but others apparently, are going to be under ordering on DC. So if you're on the fence about any of those DC books, just add it to your sub.
So you mentioned lower profit margins. Let me ask you realistically, and we're talking, okay, a year from now, right? You guys are going to go through an adjustment period, how you do your reorders, etc. But you also mentioned that Lunar was not set up for this. They're not ready to be a distributor, so they're going through some growing pains too. A year from now, do you think they'll have all the kinks worked out and you'll get those profit margins back?
I hope so. I don't know. And it sounds like they're willing to work with retailers, but I know there's a lot of anger with that because the extra shipping costs that are now associated with this and the lower profit margin is a huge problem right now. So I'm hoping a year from now that works out, but I'm not optimistic. I'm in the middle. Like, I'm trying to be as realistic as possible about this. I don't think this spells the end for DC. I don't think this spells the end for comic retailers either. I'm not on that boat, and I'm not in that sign up of this is all a plan from DC for books to eventually only be magazines and trades and hardcovers, and they're going to do away with the single issues. I don't think that's the direction they're going in, and I don't think this is a sign of that. So I'm just working with what I have now, but I don't know. I don't think that the profit margins are going to improve.
Obviously, I'm on the side of the reader right now where I was like, fuck it, just give me my books, right? And maybe that's a benefit in this situation because I'm able to look at it with a little different eyes than you can. You know, we've mentioned several times on the show throughout this entire pandemic, every single company is going to have to evolve or die. If they want to continue to be successful, they're going to have to change. And I think DC saw this as a way to make a change for what they foresee is going to be better. And yeah, we all kind of have to suffer through that a little bit. We all had to suffer in the beginning of the pandemic, and now it's just kind of normal. We all had to, make changes in our personal life and go through all these different things. But you get through that, and you will get through that, and comic retailers will get through that, and it's not going to be fun, and you're all going to be upset about it and tweeting about it and saying how much it sucks and you wish it had stayed the same. But I would set a timer a year from now, let's bring it up again, and we'll go back and we'll look at this situation now and see how it's changed. And as someone who is optimistic and, I kind of is trying to look at what their business is and keep in mind the things that we don't know, I really think once we get through this growth period a year from now, it will hopefully be better than where they were, not just for retailers, but for them as well.
I'll be interested, to see what moves they make over the next year and in their inevitable relaunch, whenever that does come, because so many books already are getting canceled from their line and many are not getting, there's no new number ones really, not as often as there used to be under Dan DiDio. So that tells me that there is some kind of relaunch or an end to this line of books coming and in the near future, probably before the end of the year. So whenever that happens, I'm hoping that all the ducks will be in line and we can order those in and figure them out. But the other thing too is with Jim Lee, I know there's a lot of positive pub with him because of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and apparently he was instrumental in that too. But I know Dan DiDio was way more in the trenches as far as calling retailers up, calling comic book stores, and being in contact, going out to comic conventions. We were at MegaCon several years back. We were at the DC Comics, outlining what's coming up. And he was the one going out there like, you got to pump these books up. Like, I know you don't like speaking in front of these, Clay Madden especially, he's just quiet and he's kind of a dick. But everyone else, it's like, hey, speak up. Let's talk about these books. Get excited. Sell your book. Like he told them straight up in the middle of the fucking panel. So, he was working hard for the retailer, for the comics, for the creators themselves. And I'm not seeing that yet from Jim Lee. So that's the only concern I have right now. And I don't know how much control he actually has over any of this anyway.
I know what happened. I just figured it out while you were talking. They all went, Steve Geppi included, to a viewing of Snyder's Justice League. And Snyder goes, that wasn't shit. And they're like, oh, pull out. We're done. We'll see. I would really like us to revisit this in 6 months or a year and see where we've come. I am still holding out hope. The Palpa is holding out hope.
We need a little bit of hope here. Definitely need it these days.
Can I have a hope song like, that's my hope song. You hear that and you get hope. Or your eardrums break. I don't know. Both. One of the two.
They break so you don't have to hear that again. So there's hope right there. So while not directly referencing DC's departure from Diamond, IDW, speaking of hope, issued a pledge of support to the direct market and comic shop owners.
They said, quote, in brightest day, in a year of comic market volatility and uncertainty, IDW is pledging its support for direct market comic retailers by extending full returnability on all new releases through at least the end of July and removing all associated fees for the foreseeable future. Comic shops are the front line of the comic industry, where word of mouth, spinner racks, and staff hand selling make all the difference in a comic book success, end quote.
Very, very true. It's not it's showing up on Comixology and then a book becomes a hit. It hits the comic shop first, and from there it spirals and grows, and people say, hey, I heard Saga was really good. Who do you think they fucking bought it from first? The comic shop. And then they pick it up from the trades or hardcovers or digitally if they'd like, but it all starts at the store.
Speaking of Saga, you just had to bring up Saga.
I had to.
You had to, because it just grinds me. It just makes me so angry.
Do you think IDW saw this as an opportunity of, supporting comic retailers, but kind of extending their hand and saying, I know you're hurting, I know this sucks, but we're here, here's returnability, here's an opportunity to push our line of books and really raise the numbers for them?
Yeah, I don't know that I see this as IDW calling out DC and being like, you bitches, but I think they saw it and they're like, damn, we got to jump on this. Like, this is a great opportunity for us to push it more, because people, again, are going to make that emotional reaction of, well, DC doesn't care about me, but they do, so let me just go with them and order more from them and push more from them. And yeah, I think a lot of people are going to do that. And if IDW is on top of their game and creating great books, then that's going to continue. And not to say that ordering less from DC is going to continue, because right now I think saying that is a very emotional reaction. And when you have enough customers who come in who say, hey, why don't you have this book? Yeah, you're going to start ordering up again, realistically. But if IDW can jump on that opportunity, that little gap, right? And just jump right in there and continue to bring out great works, and they're just going to keep on going, because once people can get their hands on that DC book, it's not going to be, well, I really like this IDW and I want to read this DC, but let me go with DC and not, right? Because they're already on board.
A lot of changes happening in the comic industry, and a big one here comes from Stepan Sajic. From Harleen, he wrote it and drew it. Amazing comic book, really enjoyed it. Tweeted out that he's completed his final pages in the standard comic industry and will be focusing on creator-owned comics full-time instead.
He tweeted, quote, the remaining few decades, if I got them in me, I'll be doing my own stuff and making a metric fuck ton of webcomics. You all are free to join me. They will be printed eventually, but as graphic novels only, end quote.
No word on if the Poison Ivy DC Black Label book titled Isley is canceled because of this. So we're not sure. I really wanted to read that, especially if it was in line with Harleen.
Do you think he really wanted to do his own stuff, or do you think he was frustrated by some things?
Obviously, something made him depart from the big, the mainly DC. That's who he was doing some work from. So a contract ended, or they didn't want him, they didn't renew him, or I don't see why they wouldn't, because he's moved a lot of books for him, but maybe he wanted more money, and he mentioned a metric fuck ton of webcomics, and I don't know if that also associates with a lot of money, but that's how he was discovered. Did a ton of DeviantArt work, and from there blew up. He put up the Sunstone comic first on DeviantArt, I believe, and then from there it got collected and continued. Then there was Kickstarters and all of that stuff, and then eventually started doing work for DC and did some amazing work, but I don't know. I think it was a question of money and maybe them not having room for as many artists at this time.
That's potential. It could be, too, that he just prefers to do things digitally. When he does his own stuff, he's on his own time frame. He can do what he wants when he wants it, and it could very well be that DC was like, well, you got to maintain the schedule, and it just wasn't something that he wanted to do or the stress he wanted to take on.
And I remember with Justice League Odyssey, there was an issue of them needing to redo the whole book, and then he stepped out after, I think, 3 issues and decided to move on to a different project, which might have been Harleen, but there's definitely been some butting of heads already in the past between Stepan and DC Comics, at least.
So Stepan gonna step tripping out.
And more changes coming as well, this time from Brian Michael Bendis.
On the Off-Panel podcast, Brian Michael Bendis revealed that his run on Superman is ending.
Woo! That's great.
Some celebration.
He said, quote, "I'm heading towards the end of my run on Superman, so I've been more reflective on it. And I'll never be more grateful than I got to heal my near-death experience through Superman and get through this pandemic. No matter what's going on with this world, I get to spend a few hours each day with Superman. That's a gift," end quote.
That does not sound like he's voluntarily stepping away.
From what I hear and from what I've seen, his books aren't pulling the weight that the contract probably cost.
Oh, yeah, of course not. Have you read Superman?
I see how many we sell, and it's not the Batman numbers that DC wanted.
Mm-hmm. He didn't say which issue would be his last or what he'd take over afterwards.
I know he did clarify on Twitter saying that it's far from being finished, so it's not within the next year or so, but it's at least coming to an end. Bendis has been writing Action Comics and Superman since April 2018 after signing that exclusive multi-year deal with DC Comics.
That's a long time. I didn't realize. I mean, we fell off like a few issues in.
Well, the problem is he wasn't going to leave Marvel over a 1 or 2 year contract. He probably got at this point a lifetime contract for when he eventually retires.
What book would you want to see him take over?
He can stay in that Young Justice universe, whatever it was called, the Wonder. I don't know what that line was called, but he can do that if he wants. I don't like what he did with Superman, and Peter J. Tomasi and Pat Gleason were doing an incredible job on that run. And now, Pat Gleason is exclusive to Marvel, and we've got Peter J. Tomasi on Detective Comics, which is awesome, and I've been enjoying that. But the magic they had on Superman was unmatched, and they really brought the character back into really good sales, into the forefront of conversation. People were loving the character, and then Brian Michael Bendis kind of undid that and wanted to do his own thing, which goes back to what you were saying, like with the DC films, where a lot of these artists want to have their own take on the character and build their own ideas with it, and I get that, but when it's not as good as that previous thing, then it's going to suffer extra much in the eyes of the readers.
And that's the unfortunate thing, and ultimately I think where Bendis failed is he came in after somebody that was so strong, things that were resonating really well with readers, and then made those changes and just didn't come across as strong. So it's not to say before we got Tomasi, right, before we got that team, maybe we would have enjoyed his take on it and said, yeah, this is better than what we've gotten before, but he couldn't follow it up.
They're going to have to put him on something because they got to pay the guy. So we'll see what it is. That does wrap up our news for this week, though. Tons of comic talk. Let's head into our Patreon shout-outs.
These are the thank yous to everyone who helps make the show possible. We have 4 shout-outs this week.
First one goes out to Kat on Instagram @_Ornest. So that's OURNEST.
Is it our nest?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Ornest, you just made it like cooler.
@_Our_Nest.
Kat posted a close-up of a blooming hibiscus along with her other gardening progresses.
Getting huge into gardening up in Georgia, so make sure to check out all of those images on her Instagram. Next one comes to Matt on Twitter @MrForklift. You can also head on over to his film website, typingaboutmovies.com.
He tweeted, quote, "For those that missed tonight's 30 for 30 on ESPN, you missed 2 hours of quality programming. Be Water did more than just glorify Bruce Lee's movie career and martial arts mastery. It delved into race relations and discussions that seem very relevant right now." End quote.
30 for 30 is amazing. I don't have a channel that can watch them, and I watched the whole Jordan documentary at my parents' because they have ESPN Plus or whatever it's called. So maybe I should go over there and watch more of these documentaries, but I do subscribe to the 30 for 30 podcast, and that's basically where they interview the directors or some of the people that were on these documentaries. And yeah, Bruce went through a lot of issues because of his race, and that's very reflective of what's happening right now. And from what I gathered on that particular podcast is it took a lot of restraint for a man that could dismantle just about anyone with just his hands to not get violent with people when they were being prejudiced against him.
If you have the ability to check it out, definitely do. It sounds very interesting.
Be water, just like Bruce Lee.
Just be water. Next up, we have Jared, Twitter handle @SpoonSandwich.
He tweeted out, quote, "Wow, guys, 100 plus followers now. Thank you all. A small milestone for some, but man, it made me feel good this morning." End quote.
Congratulations.
It's the little things. Absolutely the little things. So make sure to follow Jared @SpoonSandwich on Twitter. Let's get him to 200.
200.
Final shout out goes out to Scott on Twitter @LazyGamingGuys and @Pandanime.
Scott recently did a 5-hour Bloodborne stream with the rest of the Lazy Gaming Guys.
I take it upon myself each month to upload one of their audios of these streams onto Apple Podcasts and on your favorite streaming. So if you want to check out this over 4-hour long audio stream, make sure to find it on your favorite podcatcher. Just search Lazy Gaming Guys.
But thank you so much, Scott, Jared, Matt, and Kat, for your Patreon support.
If you too would like your shout out every month, head on over to patreon.com/thereasonsimmbroke. Helps out the podcast, helps us keep going, helps pay for the upload costs that go with the podcast, such as the audio leveling, the audio that goes up on Libsyn, and the equipment that we eventually have to upgrade or replace as well.
But another great way you can support our podcast is through wearing some merchandise.
Head on over to thereasonsimbroke.com, click on the pull-down menu, click on merch. You will find a variety of designs and styles and t-shirts and colors, and those are just handpicked, a few of them. Click on the shop portion and you will see even more designs.
There's everything. There's tank tops, t-shirts, all of it. Get something for your baby. Your baby needs the support as well.
Masks. You've got masks up there.
Oh, that's right. There are masks.
Bobby wanted those up, and they are now up. So you can get some with Batman, Joker, the Reasons I'm Broke logo. The Brokehead Core logo is on there. So definitely check them out at thereasonsimbroke.com.
But that does wrap up our Patreon shoutouts for the week. We're going to move into our comic book highlight, which is something that you have reread, I think probably more than any other book. You love it. It's your go-to. You need to relax. You need something to just enjoy. And you go back to this book.
This week's comic book highlight is Green Lantern by Geoff Johns, Volume 3.
This is written by Geoff Johns and more, with art by Ethan Van Sciver, Ivan Reis, Patrick Gleason, and more. And the colorist is a best colorist name ever, Moose, just Moose, Bauman, and more.
The Sinestro Corps War is what ends up finally hitting in these omnibuses. So what's releasing is the full 9 years of Green Lantern as written by Geoff Johns. And before you had to get the No Fear trade paperback, but then you had to know that there's Hal Jordan Most Wanted, there's the Green Lantern Blackest Night, Brightest Day, Sinestro Corps War, and there was really no, unless you knew the order and you'd have to find it online, there wasn't a way to get the full run because a lot of these trades already had gone out of print, unfortunately. Well, DC decided to do these, first they did them in hardcover, very expensive, but now they're doing them in softcover. So there's the fully in order, they tell you which issues they have in there, and it's not all Geoff Johns, but they put in the filler issues that give you the extra character moments, like Kilowog especially, and it fits perfectly in the timeline for Geoff Johns' run of these books. So I love the Green Lantern run, and it is amazing. Some of my favorite comics ever. Of course, I wanted to sub to this omnibus, and they're now up to volume 3, and this run, which is the Sinestro Corps War, is one of my favorite lines and arcs in the whole Geoff Johns run of comic books. It's about Sinestro discovering and building his own core through fear and overcoming it, knowing how to harness it. But when you get to the end of it, and I don't give a shit about spoilers because this is years long, you should have read Green Lantern by now. And if not, pick this up. But it is all about Sinestro doing what's best for the Green Lantern Corps. Even though he created this core of his own and took a lot of Green Lantern lives because of it, he is essentially forcing their hand to murder and be able to kill using the Green Lantern rings, and saying that because if you're not able to kill, you're not policing the universe, and if you're not able to police through fear or through force, then you're never going to reach that goal of keeping the universe in order as Green Lantern. So that's the best part of this, where he forces their hand so much that they're like, no, we've unlocked that ability in your ring. You can now kill. And Sinestro's like, I've won this war. In spite of the outcome now moving forward, this is for the best of the Corps. And it gives you so much more depth to the character of Sinestro. It gives you so much history between Hal and Sinestro, where it's like they have these personalities. You figured they would have constantly been fighting from the get-go, but they got along great at the start of this when they were both Green Lanterns, because they both rebelled against the Guardians. When they ostracized and wanted to kick Sinestro out, Hal Jordan fought for them to keep him in the Corps. So there's a lot in there that I really enjoy because of that relationship between Sinestro and Hal, but between Sinestro and the rest of the Corps as well.
One of my favorite things about you going back and rereading this, and like I said, anytime that you're reading a comic, it's either Superman Red Sun or it's Geoff Johns' run of Green Lantern. But you've obviously read this through, right? You've read the entire thing through several times. Mm-hmm. This isn't the first. But you'll be reading it now and you'll stop and you'll be like, oh my God, they did this, which is direct foreshadowing to the thing that's going to happen like 5 years from now. And you're discovering those things and really, further understanding how well planned out he had this entire run, even for when he knew he would eventually no longer be on it. Mm-hmm. He set it up so that it would continue the way he wanted it to.
Yeah, at the end of his New 52 run, and I'm excited to get there eventually, but it'll probably be another, 3 or 4 volumes. But he has that flash forward scene of this is where the characters end up. You can do whatever you want in between there, but this is the ending to the Green Lantern Corps as I know them or as I wrote them. And that's what I love about this run. And whatever you may think of Geoff on the film side or TV side, I'm able to separate that with his work from years ago and his work of Green Lantern in this run of comic books. And I don't know where they're going to pull from on HBO Max's show of it. And if they do it from here, it's going to be really difficult to properly adapt this into what the comics did so well. And I did like Emerald Knights a lot. I know they pulled a lot of Geoff Johns' ideas from there into that special, and I really liked it. So it is doable, but I'm going to be very curious to see how they end up pulling it off, especially since this is probably going to be very effects heavy. Or at least it should be if they try to do it like Sinestro Corps War.
I don't know. HBO's growing on me. They're doing a great job with Watchmen. I'm really invested in that show.
Growing on you? When was it ever negative?
I won't say it was, but like now I have, before if you had told me that, I'd be like, yeah, it's difficult to pull off. But now we're 3 episodes into Watchmen, and I'm like, they're doing a really good job. They can do this too.
I'm excited. I can't wait. Do you have any thoughts on the character of Sinestro? I know you read the tail end of Geoff Johns' run years ago.
I did. I really liked what they did with Sinestro. I liked his galaxy pants and his little scraggy finger. He's a very Snape-like character, right? In the beginning, you just hate him. And then as it gets further and you understand his motives, you just grow to really like him and you don't want anything bad to happen. And he gets more handsome. He's like Vegeta. His forehead shrinks a little bit and he just gets more handsome as it goes on. So I think it really goes back into what we love in a villain of he's a very complex villain, and so much of what he does is his own mind trying to do better for other people. Like you said, do better for the Green Lanterns, do better for his people who had all that tragedy happen to him. And he doesn't do it in the way that everybody agrees with, but he's like, nope, this is the most efficient way to get these things done that's going to be better for everybody in the end. And if I have to be the villain for that to happen, then that's who I have to be. And
he doesn't seek the glory either. And in fact, he fights against it when they write because they're constantly chronicling what happens in history in the Book of Oa, I think is what it is. And he completely gets rid of all the pages that involve the good that he did for the Corps. He leaves the Sinestro Corps War and the bad, and then you can interpret whatever you want out of that. But his intention as far as making it for the best of the Corps is not in those books. And that's for him wanting to get rid of that and not wanting to be recognized. And I know once I get to the end of it, it'll become clearer again, at least to me as a reader, because I will have gone through all of these. But it's that character that is for the greater good. and a hero in tons of ways, even though you don't see it now when you're reading these things. And, there is a clash there between the two. When you get to the very end, you find out that this truly was a story about Hal and Sinestro. And yes, there's other core members there too, but there was so much there that at the end tell you that he was it's not necessarily even this was for what he thinks is the greater good, but no, he was a good person at the end of it. And you see that in the actions, in the way he treats some of the Guardians at the end. And he doesn't say what he's done or who he spared or anything. He just lets it leave as, no, I am the villain. Yes, I'm the bad guy. And lets it go like that. And it's so cool to see that progression from almost the start of it.
You get excited about this the same way I get excited about my romance novels.
That's right. And I can't wait to see if they end up doing more with the character. I liked Mark Strong, his portrayal in that Green Lantern live action film. But if they do him in the HBO Max, that'll be awesome. I liked them in that short-lived Green Lantern animated show. Even though there wasn't a ton there that would eventually lead into what the comics did, they were kind of trying to do their own thing. But at the core, it was still Sinestro.
At the Lantern core?
But I hope that whatever comes out of HBO Max or Zack Snyder's Justice League, that we just get another a strong and lengthy portrayal or that story seen in another medium other than the comics. And the comics did it so well.
There should just be a Sinestro movie. I'd be about that.
I 100% agree. Let's head into the Brocat blog. We've got a listener question on what Palpa Kelly and I have been doing, as well as my reviewing of Justice League.
Oh, yeah. So our question comes from @CubanSlim, who says, quote, "At Reasons I'm Broke, number 407. Both publishers, DC and Marvel, merge in the near future to bring us amazing content. What story would you want first? I want Spider-Man to get ported to Gotham and Batman vs. Spider-Man ensues for various issues after they finally come to grips and team up. Companion book to this story would be to see Damian ported to New York, and same scenario plays out with Tony Stark Iron Man." End quote.
He submitted this for last week's episode. We had to record early because we were not going to be able to record during this week, and we're able to include it this week for 408. So this is like a fantasy scenario. Who would we want to see team up once again if Marvel or DC had, were to play nice with one another? Do you have any initial answers on this one?
No, I'm still thinking. You go first.
I don't know the Marvel Universe as well as, the Marvel comic readers, so I can't really say who would definitely be a good companion for all of these. I did recently read the Spider-Man and Batman team up, and that was fascinating to see with the Joker and Carnage teaming up and then eventually fighting one another. And there's also the one of Batman and Captain America where the Joker betrays the Red Skull
You betray me.
Well, deep down, he's still a patriot, is what he tells him.
Okay.
So there's a lot of those little character moments that could happen. We're talking about Sinestro now. I'm more interested in what villain he would team up with. And I know a lot of Marvel comic readers love this character, and I don't have enough knowledge about it, but I know they would probably wet their pants at me saying this, but Sinestro and Doctor Doom, I think, is a character that I often hear as similar properties of, the doing things for the greater good. Although I don't think he has his Sinestro Corps War has affected any kind of the Marvel Universe, at least in that greater way that Sinestro has. But at least I know that is one of the more respected villains in the Marvel Universe. So to me, I'd like to see that particular team up there.
I would really like to see Silver Surfer, and I don't even know
Mogo.
Silver Surfer and Mogo would be so great together. Just patrolling the galaxy, doing shit. That would be really cool.
Not a romance? Silver Surfer and a female DC character?
No, because he had, what's her name? I don't even remember her name, but I loved her.
Was it Autumn? No, it wasn't Autumn. It was...
I don't remember her name. I know exactly what she looks like in my mind, and I cry real tears whenever I think about that.
That was the Dan Slott run, yeah.
Yes, it was so good. So, yes, would love to see Silver Surfer. I feel like Batman, I don't know, he might team up with Professor X or something.
I'd like to see that.
That would be kind of cool, where he's like, your methods of reading minds aren't cool, but thanks for the info. I'm going to go beat shit up.
He would temporarily sort of be like his Alfred, because he would give him intel through his mind.
That would be cool. He could. No, you can't replace Alfred, though. He wouldn't cook for him.
Temporarily.
He wouldn't cook for him.
That's true.
Batman would probably have a problem with his school. He'd be like, this isn't right?
You think so? I mean,
Yeah,
he takes in people.
I know he does, but he would find like something wrong about it.
Gotcha.
He's got to find something wrong about everything.
That's true. Batman and Wolverine would not get along,
No!
but they would respect one another.
Yeah, they would.
By the end of the story.
Kind of like Raphael and Batman respected each other by the end.
Well, what I loved about that is, I mean, it was a paternal figure for the Turtles because, I mean, they were teenagers, right? So they were all his Robin, just like everyone else is forever his Robin, but he related so much to Raphael because of their backstories.
Mm-hmm. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head. You know that like Black Cat and Catwoman would show up together, though. They would do it. It would happen.
How about She-Hulk and the Female Furies? Just have a bunch of literally strong female characters.
I don't think She-Hulk would help them, though, because the female Furies are all evil.
Big Barda, then. Big Barda and She-Hulk.
She-Hulk and Big Barda would be pretty cool.
I've got one more, because Daredevil's a lawyer and constantly investigating and everything. How about Daredevil and The Question?
I don't know enough about The Question. I feel like I know a little bit more about Daredevil. Okay.
You know, it's basically Rorschach.
Yeah, I want to see Constantine with somebody. Maybe like Daredevil and Constantine.
It would be more like...
Doesn't Daredevil just see blood? That's what happened in the TV show.
There's no magic involved. Why would Constantine be there?
Just let him be there. Just let him do what he wants to do.
Constantine and Doctor Strange, or Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate. Now we're going into the amalgam universe.
Oh, now it's too much. We got to reel it back in. Batman and Wolverine. Okay, safe territory.
Plenty of ideas there, though.
Yeah, there's so many because you could find a parallel in everything.
Thank you very much, Bobby, for submitting your question this week. As always, you can tweet over or on Discord, send us a question, and if you intend it to be answered on the podcast, let us know in the tweet or the message, and that way we'll include it in the show notes. Otherwise, I'll just kind of answer it right away. So, but yeah, if you want to hear it, on the podcast, let us know. We also have speakpipe.com/thereasonsimmbroke. You can leave us a voicemail or a comment in that way, and you can be heard on the show.
But now we can move into what we did this week, unless you'd like to talk about Justice League first.
It's going to be a lot of DC talk. I don't know if it still relates to what we're talking about now, but while we were on vacation and out of town, I got to see Justice League for the second time since, and the first time was in theaters, as I had mentioned. But what was fascinating to me this time seeing it is now that we have the information on what all was reshot and what the actors looked like in their reshoots, and then you compare it with the hair color or the haircut that they had at the time. Like Ezra Miller had the one from the Harry Potter one where it's like a bowl cut. Mm-hmm. You remember that movie?
Yes.
And he was like the silent one, and you can see that same haircut in the reshoots.
Looking at the stars and where Snyder was at the time.
You really extrapolate all of this. One of the things which is very glaring, and that's just one of the things, when the Flash says, "Stop right there, I'm in. I need friends." And in the original trailer, from what I gathered, Batman says, okay, and the scene maybe plays out differently or it ends there. But then you have these glaring additions as you're watching it where he says, people move too slow for me. And that's when you see where it was clear the reshoot. So Joey just added this weird dialogue in there that is it sticks out like a sore thumb because the directing that he does, Snyder's is more dynamic. He likes to keep the camera moving. Joey Whedon keeps it static, or he'll do this like focus shot of like background, foreground, and that's all his, and you can immediately tell. And when you have added scenes or added dialogue, it's just a still shot, and then the actor like, all right, now say the line, and then they threw it in there. The lighting is way different. The color, so I don't know. I don't know if it's because the budget wasn't high enough that it doesn't fit or that it's glaring, or because I know now which parts were more or less reshot, but as I'm seeing it, it's like, holy shit. And I know that we have that number of over 80% of Justice League was redone or is a part of Joey Whedon's, but as you're watching it, I'm like, there's very few fucking scenes here that were Snyder's. The whole scene and sequence of them in the Batcave or in the helicarrier, those were all completely reshot. So we don't even have any bits of Snyder's versions of those scenes at all. We have the trailer portions where you know that Cyborg had a map set up of Steppenwolf's location, and it's like, holy shit, we almost had that scene. I don't even know what that is at all. We don't know. And instead it's rewritten dialogue, and you can tell in Ben Affleck's face because he wasn't as in shape as when he was shooting it initially. And then you see the change in wardrobe completely during the reshoots. You see Joe Whedon focuses on Wonder Woman's ass in various shots, and Zack didn't do anything like that. in his cut of the film. And then you can tell blatantly again when it's a static fucking shot, like when he's holding she's holding the robber and with the lasso of truth. And it's like, there's another fucking static shot of it. And it doesn't fit with what Zack Snyder had done in Man of Steel or BVS or any of this. So it was just really weird and bizarre to see how much of it was not at all Zack Snyder's cut of the film. And it's, again, I know that we have the numbers of 80%, but when you're watching it, at least on my second viewing only, none of that is, it's a Joe Whedon film. Like, it completely directed by him. And it wasn't even like, okay, well, we're going to tweak here and we're going to add here. It's like some of these sequences are completely new and completely different. And the whole bit of the mother boxes, because we don't see Silas die in this version of the film. So that explains him like just dropping in, grabbing the cube and then leaving, because they had to figure out a way for him to get all three of the mother boxes. And that was one of my complaints in this, where the whole Joe Whedon's film of his version of these characters is they're goofballs. They don't know any of what they're doing at all. There's that whole Pet Sematary line that was added in there, and all of that shit was added by Joe Whedon. And Batman saying, oh, I need to bring him back. And Wonder Woman saying, it's because you feel guilty about his death. And then he brings up Steve Trevor. None of that was in Snyder. None of that was Snyder's shot at all. So it's like that's the rewrite to bring back Wonder Woman, to bring it to the forefront. There's this weird plot about you need to be the leader because I'm not, or I can't be because, and he intended Superman to be the leader. So that was all because of the success of Wonder Woman. I'm assuming that they added all of that in there. This fucking terrible scene where he's wearing the suit, and it's not intended to be seen in the way that Joe Whedon shot it, but that's the one where she's putting his shoulder back in place. And you can tell that the way Batman's face looks terrible anytime it's a Joe Whedon scene. It's like he didn't know how to film these suits, didn't know how to film Batman, and it makes it look like cosplay for sure when it's a Joe Whedon scene, and it's really blatant. I skipped all of the Russian family bits. I just kept hitting fast forward on HBO Max there during all of those because they literally don't add a fucking thing to the whole scene. There's when Aquaman puts the guy down and says it's on him. Then he looks at his hand and there's that green blood from the parademons. None of that. That's all reshot. And you see it in Flash's scenes, and he doesn't know what he's doing either. And that's all Joe Whedon redone as well, where, I don't know, I think the last thing I have to say about all of this, and I don't think you saw it either, but it seems like they had some kind of cookie cutter thing that they wanted to force this movie to be, where Wonder Woman was the motherly figure in the group for whatever reason. Batman was the hated one that I don't know what they were trying to fucking do with Batman at all. They made him a very unlikable character in this part of the film, where he's constantly fighting with the rest of the league. He's trying to force them, like, no, we need to bring him back, which is, I don't know, it just didn't fit with the character they were building. And again, maybe he did want to bring him back, I don't know, but in the way that they wrote this dialogue, they made him where everyone just doesn't like the guy. And I don't understand why. I don't know where that fits. And then Aquaman and Flash were the siblings. They were constantly fighting. And then you see it in the rewrites, like, he's like, no, I'm afraid of Aquaman. No, don't tell anyone about this. And I'm going to steal this. And I don't know why they tried to, well, I know why, but it just infuriated me watching this happen to these characters. Them treated with so little respect and made for an audience that frankly was not there for Man of Steel or BVS. You know, people like us that were enjoying where the DCEU was heading, they made this movie that was not for us. And if you enjoy Justice League, and you know, I will say whatever I say on the podcast or on Twitter or whatever, if you're an MCU sheep, whatever I say on there is not personally to you, because I ultimately don't give a shit about what you watch or do enjoy or don't, unless it affects the things that I was enjoying. So that's why there is such a resentment against the people that shit on Man of Steel or BVS, and they happen to be MCU sheep most of the time. But you know, I'm passionate about this stuff, and most people that are more casual about the superhero stuff are like, Daniel's just passionate about it. That's fine. Don't take what I say to you personally as me attacking you. It's me speaking against these general direction that Warner Brothers wanted this to go in, that these fans wanted it to go in, that these bloggers and reviewers wanted it to go in, when they weren't the ones supporting this universe anyway. Do you have any thoughts on any of this?
That was a lot. I feel it emotionally too. So I did have a follow-up question. Do you think if you hadn't gotten so much background and information about the Snyder Cut that you still would have been able to pick all those things out so easily?
Some of it I did not know, and I don't know if I've seen any kind of breakdown yet online of, and maybe if no one's done it, I can put out my thoughts and say this scene and this scene, and it is most of the fucking movie, but there was several scenes in it that I'm like, I don't know if this was a reshoot, and then I watched the movie the second time, I'm like, oh, that was fucking reshot for sure. This whole fucking sequence. And like, remember that scene where Bruce is like, do you talk to fish? Like when they're in the Batcave, that whole bit, and you can tell with, Ben's face and the rest of the actors, that whole thing was Joe Whedon's scene. And you can also tell by the reusing of the sets. It's like, okay, now we're going to have them back in this scene and this set again. Wonder Woman, you're going to be talking to Bruce again in that scene that we had with Alfred because it's cheaper and we're going to save money that way. So I think if not me, if we had no information where Zach was telling us, no, what Russian family, I think we would have by now pulled that out and gone, yeah, that was a reshoot. Look at his haircut, look at his face. And so I was able to pick out a lot of it. And some of it, it's like, yeah, we knew about that already. We knew about this already. Like the Steppenwolf bit in Darkseid, that probably would have been one of the last things that people would have kind of seen, because I know that's not obvious, at least to me, unless I knew that Darkseid was in there. That whole scene, though, does play really fucking weird, where it's really short and really rushed. And it seems like it could have been like it was part of something bigger. It's like, so I think people would have dug into it. But I think that's the scene, the history lesson that would have been the least obvious from watching it, because a lot of that was Zach, and then they re-CGI'd over Uxas to make it Steppenwolf.
Well, again, like, it's so crappy that this entire thing had to happen, right? That we had to get all these reshoots, but at least he did a shitty enough job that we all pushed for the right thing. And once again, are getting Zach's true vision and not the changes that would have been made, not to fit it into that much of a cookie cutter, but to still fit it into what the studio had wanted.
And from what I've seen on the Superman scene at the end, and correct if anyone knows more about it, it looks to me like every shot in that suit, except for the last one where he's pulling his shirt open and he flies off, because there you don't see the obvious CGI mustache or whatever, but every other shot in the whole sequence at the end where he's fighting Steppenwolf and he has all of that looks like reshoots completely to me. I know people point out that the one of him dodging Steppenwolf's punch was a part of Zach's, and I'd have to rewatch that bit again and see if the mustache was CGI'd out or not, but we don't even get the shot of him looking at the boom tube in this version of his film. So there's a lot of Superman footage in that final act that we have not seen, and everything in there about the freezing breath and the I'm a fan of justice and him punching Steppenwolf, all of that was Joey Whedon. So I'm very excited to see the Man of Steel Superman return next year.
You should just do a watch along and you say everything that you're noticing.
That wouldn't be, that might not be a bad idea, but I'd have to do it with someone else who's willing to watch that. I don't know if I have it in me to watch it a third time, especially not skipping it, to do like a commentary on it, not being able to skip over scenes. That'd be tough.
But you could do it for the people if they wanted it.
If there's enough demand, I guess, maybe.
Well, I'm sorry you had to sit through that, but at least you got the opportunity to really sit there, dive into it. And I think ultimately you're going to appreciate the Snyder Cut more. That's what we should do. Right before the Snyder Cut releases, you got to watch this one again.
Fuck no.
But you'll just appreciate it more.
I'll have this fresh in my mind.
Okay.
I'll just say that.
Perfect.
But the rest of the Bro Kept Block is the more personal side of Palpa Kelli and I and what we've been doing this week. I've been talking. Give me a little rest here.
So we got the opportunity to go on vacation. It's our, I guess, yearly vacation. This is just, we go with my family to the beach. We take our little one and we just have a great week and get to relax and kind of take some downtime and away from everything that we've been doing. So that's why we recorded the podcast early last week and a little late this week, but making it happen. Couldn't skip a week, even though we were relaxing.
Right. Yeah. It's a fun time. And I think what's even better this year is, Leo is almost 3 years old. So every year he can interact more or comprehend more. And how much of it he'll remember, we don't know. But as you mentioned, I think last night is, we'll have these memories.
Right.
And we're seeing him still enjoy himself in the moment, you know? And obviously all of that helps in his in how he handles the beach or whatever in the future. So it's just been fun seeing him pick up shells now and play with the sand and
want to be out in the ocean and, splashing in the waves. Yeah.
Last year he wasn't about the beach because he got knocked down by a wave. So
he did. His very first wave knocked him over.
But this year he was actually like enjoying floating there with us and being outside, playing with the sand, going in the pool. We were out there much longer this year.
Oh, yeah. We spent a lot of time out there. I wish we could have spent a little bit more time because he'd go down to the beach for about an hour and play a little bit. And he's like, okay, pool time. And then want to be in the pool just because it's calmer and he can, swim around and do more things. But still really great to see him. I feel like, you eat out a lot when you're on vacation at the beach. And every time we'd take him out, it was much easier than last year taking him out when, we would really have to sit there and monitor and feed him. And this time we're like, oh, here's your pizza. We cut it up. Here's your grilled cheese, whatever. Enjoy it. And then it's also great because we go with my parents, or my parents are there the majority of the time. So they really get that interaction with him and to get to see that. And sometimes they watch him so that we can sit and relax. And, we got to go away for a night, which was nice to, even though we talked about him the whole time, we didn't have to slow down when we were walking or have that second set of eyes, constantly. What is he doing? How is he? Is he okay? And just got to be adults for a little bit.
Yeah, St. Augustine, it was where we went for one night, and it's an amazing, beautiful old town. A lot of it was still closed because of the pandemic, unfortunately, but the night we went, or the day we went, things had just started opening over there, so that was really neat to see some, at least returning businesses, a lot of that excitement there on that Sunday and Monday. And it is a really nice town. We got to check out some of the local coffee. That's big for you.
Oh, yeah. It was so cool. So I didn't realize, and we had gotten local coffee last year, but I hadn't realized that there's a roastery in St. Augustine. So it's very small batch coffee. The espresso that you get is fresh espresso. Fresh espresso. So, we definitely tried the different coffee places. Delicious every time. And a lot of those local places have oat milk. And I guess because they're smaller, they have more control over the things that they just slap up on their menu. And I drink oat milk in all my coffee now. So to get, when I go to work, we don't have oat milk. So I take my oat milk from the house and then I mix it with the espresso. And then it not that it tastes bad, but it's not like you're mixing it all fresh right there. Because the espresso is a little watered down from the ice by the time you pour in the oat milk, and I can't heat up the oat milk and all that kind of stuff. So that was really great to have, that experience. There's an ice pop place that we want, or that we love, that we went to and got a bunch of ice pops and took them back with us and, got to share them with Leo and throughout the days. And those are just delicious too.
Yeah, it was a fun time. I disconnected a little bit quicker this year than I did last year. So I still was able to not stress out about the comic shop. And it's one of those things where I'm sure you went through something similar of, I can't do anything while I'm out here. It's not, whatever happens while I'm gone is going to be handled or not handled. And I'll just handle it myself when I get back. But, what am I going to do from out here?
Yeah, I did go through that. I think I checked in with work a little more than you did. And mostly more so, I don't know, I'm really invested. Like, I really wanted to know how they were doing. But also my assistant manager, when I was leaving, she reached out to me. She's like, real talk, I'm really nervous because we have all these things, all these moving parts, and you're leaving. And I pretty much told her, you're not going to do anything different than I would if I were here. You have all the same resources I have. I trust you. You don't need my permission to do things. If you have questions, right, here's my proxy, here's our district manager. Reach out to them. But she made it a really big point not to message me. She's like, you've done so much. I want you to get away. I want you to relax. So I would reach out to the team or to her, and she's like, shut up and go away. We're fine. And looking at the numbers, they did a really good job this week without me. And that was great for me to see because 98% of the time, the manager goes out of town and something dips. Right? Scores dip or out the window times dip or something. Something is off when we're gone. And nothing happened. Like, they legitimately did a great job. We're still number one in the district in a lot of ways. We're still making a lot of money, and that was with reduced hours. And they're still they wanted to make me happy, right? They wanted me to come back and see these great things and understand that I can take that time for myself and that they're fully capable. And they are. And the best part of that is I've done a lot to build them to that point. But now I'm like, what am I going to do now? Right? I've spent all these months doing all these things and they're just fine. They don't need me.
That's good. Did you enjoy yourself on vacation, though? Were you able to relax and everything?
I did definitely, like you said, disconnect a little bit faster, and we got that night away. It's definitely a different kind of relaxation when Leo's there because, you know, he wakes up in the middle of the night and I'm Ba now. I'm not Ma, I'm Ba. Ba has to go and lay next to him, and then he wakes up every hour for the rest of the night and has to touch me or kick me or know that I'm there. And so then that wakes me up too, and then he's tossing and he's turning. So it was only a few nights of restful sleep. I also, while I loved getting away for that long, after about the week mark, I was like, okay, like this is enough. It's time to get back into the routine of things. So definitely something to consider going into next year when we go. And I don't know, we can talk about it. I don't know what your feelings were, but like by the time we got to today, I'm like, okay, like it's time to go back and get into the groove of things and be back in, you know, our own bed and Leo sleeping in his own bed without me next to him. I was really great. And, you know, we were there 8 days, something like that. No sunburns until the last day.
That's something to be grateful for, though.
I mean,
you know?
That is. And we had a really great time that last day. And realistically, if I had to go back and do it again, knowing I'd get a sunburn, I'd be like, yeah, fuck it. Like, we had a lot of fun, right? And I would just do it again. But I had on my SPF 50. We were only outside for 3 hours, and I looked like I wore no sunscreen for the entire day. So, I mean, it's just my redhead life. The good thing is my arms are tanning a little bit. I have a whole lot of freckles. You and Leo look great, so good for you. Yeah,
I mean, I did definitely get burnt, but I got burnt also, like right on my chest and a little bit on my shoulders.
And your forehead a little bit.
Yeah, the whatever sunscreen we used either wore off or it just wasn't strong enough for the Florida sun now.
The sun was crazy, but the beach weather was absolutely beautiful. You know, Leo discovered a bunch of new things. Like we mentioned, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We streamed that, just binged that. And he absolutely loves it.
Loves the turtles.
Wakes up in the morning, and we got to put on Turtles.
We went to a shop out in St. Augustine, and we found all 4 of the Hot Wheels. So each of the different turtles, I don't know if the footwear on there, but I guess they made a foot bus as well. But I ended up getting all 4 because I know Leo was going to love them, and he loved them. He has them fight, I guess.
They do. I walked into the living room this morning because he was making very angry noises. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And the cars were just fighting.
Yeah. Raphael's his favorite one in the cars because it's, I think, the biggest one.
Right.
So he has that one, like, fight and kill all of them, all the little cars.
He, like, screams, like, ah! And it's flying through the air. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave it alone.
And then I got anxiety while I was at the comic shop. And I do this at all the stores and whenever I visit them because they're doing things differently than I guess I would. And that's what it comes down to. But, like, their new comic shelf, it was small, and I get it because it's a tourist attraction, and I don't imagine they get a ton of subscribers there. But everything was mixed on like this shelf that wasn't even like where it featured them on the wall, but it was literally like you just pile them, and they were just all spread across all of the publishers. I don't know if they were in alphabetical order at one point or not, but they was just all mixed in together, and I wanted to just separate all of them and keep them in alphabetical order and have them actually lined up and not just tossed in there. And I don't know if that's just because a lot of people go through them and they just don't fix them. But to me, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess instead of being on my phone, I would be like fixing the shit.
Right.
But I don't know. But the rest of the store looked great though. He had a lot of collectibles, and I'm guessing that's where he makes most of his money from.
Now you know how I feel anytime we go to a restaurant or a coffee shop.
Yeah.
We went to a coffee shop frequently, right where we were staying, and every time we went through, I had something new to say about it. Every time, because it wasn't up to my standards. But then at the same time, like, I'm not going to go in there to their manager and be like, you should really be doing this, because, like, fuck it, it's theirs.
I don't know if you saw on Discord, but the Brokehead Core really enjoyed your Indian story from last week. So if you ever hear or come up with any others, or if you ever experience any other situation, definitely remember it if you can and share it on the podcast because they really enjoyed it.
The no shoes man? I forgot about him. He was just walking into the back with his no shoes. All right. I guess we're just going to have to try more restaurants and check it out.
I know Shane also wanted retail stories, and I can probably try to come up with a few every week or so, but I have one from when I used to work at a movie theater. We used to have a contest on who can get the yellowest or goldest popcorn, so we would make these batches. And eventually we figured out that if you just hit the oil button while it's popping, it'll just all come out yellow and covered in that oil. And that's different than butter. It's not going to taste like butter at all. It's literally just oil, and it's awful, and it kind of burns a little bit if it's fresh or if you put it in there. But what a lot of these guys would do is they'd make the mistake of putting a bunch of salt, the other employees, putting a ton of salt in there because it was colored yellow. But it wasn't that turned the yellow, it was the actual oil. So that's how we would win these contests. You know, people that knew would just hit the oil button as it was popping. It would come out like bright yellow. The problem is if we served it, like people would, you know, like, oh, this is disgusting. Yeah, it's either super salty or super oily. So we would then make another batch right after it and just mix it all together.
Oh my God.
So that they got like one bite. It's like, oh, that was nasty. Yeah. Oh, but this one's good.
You guys are that stereotype of the servers and chefs are doing something shitty to my food.
I guess so, yeah. You and I could never work together.
No, we couldn't.
But I was also in my teens, so I don't know I don't know the answer to it. I'm not going to say no, but I don't know if I'd do this today.
So the only crappy thing I did in my teens, like I would never serve people bad food, but I did do two things. Okay, two crappy things I did in my teens, and then we can move on. When I worked at Chick-fil-A, we used to...
I'm surprised you named the business.
Why? I don't work there. It's been like 10 years since I worked there. All right. It's been a long time. So anytime we would ring something in, it would immediately pop up in the back. And then they would make it and send it out. So if we were slow, this was actually my manager's son who used to do this. So it wasn't really me, but I took advantage too. It'd be breakfast time. He's like, "You're hungry? Are you hungry?" I'm like, "I'm always hungry." And he's like, "What do you want?" And he'd bring it in, and they'd make it, and then he'd cancel the transaction.
Oh, I see. So
and then he'd be like, "Oh, well, this was already made, so we're gonna eat it." And then we just stay up there and eat it, like whatever.
Similar things, it's called like, I guess product waste, you would just write it off, but that would happen at the movie theater too with the candy. And eventually they implemented a thing so that this would stop happening and it would cut down on waste. But we would be extra rough with the box cutter when we would open up the candy.
It's broken.
That one split. And then we would put it in the back and that'd be our snack for our shift. Like we would just put it back there and that would be what we ate. But eventually we had to log everything we had, which we had to anyway, but then they said you have to log it and you have to put the product with everything in there in a compartment. And now it's like we can't just say, oh, we damaged one, eat it, and then throw the package away.
Right.
So eventually what we had to do, unfortunately, is leave some in the package and then throw it away.
Oh my God. You still found a workaround.
Oh, there's always a way. There's always an answer.
Of course, of course. The other crappy thing I did at Chick-fil-A, and I shouldn't have done this, and I'm going to share this with you all. If fries had just come out of the fryer, right, and we dump them in, and somebody's like, "Can you make a fresh batch of fries?" Because they wanted like that oil glistening when they got, but I literally pulled it up 2 minutes ago. I'd throw some back in and just drop them in the fryer for a few seconds.
So you'd put them back in the fryer,
yeah,
just drop them back out.
So they would be all oily and glistening.
Because that's all they really want.
Right.
No, I get that.
No, but it wasn't okay. Like, I should have just made them fresh fries. It only took like 2.5 minutes.
That always killed me because when I worked at the theater, they wanted fresh popcorn.
Right.
But by the time they sat down, because popcorn goes stale really
in
quickly.
2 seconds, yeah.
By the time they sat down in their fucking seats, it was exactly as if I had made it when I did 5 minutes ago. That always pissed me off. That definitely pissed me off. Or the shit of like, half diet, half regular Coke. It's half the calories. It's like that. You're still having a fucking giant
Coke, right.
Customer things.
we could go on forever. I could go on about food service forever.
But I hope you enjoyed this longer episode this week. Sorry, it's a little bit later on Patreon, but it is out on time regardless. It's still early.
It's still early.
Earlier than when it normally releases on Sundays at noon Eastern time. Make sure to jump on our Patreon if you would like to get the show early every week. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Pinterest. You can find the link to all of those on thereasonsimbroke.com.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your Emperor, Kelli.
And I am Pokemon Breeder Daniel.
And Broke at Core. All will be well.
So your sunburns weren't the only battle wound you received from this vacation were they?
I got hurt every fucking day of this vacation. Day one, I took a chunk out of my finger with a knife because they had stupid serrated knives instead of like regular old knives.
How dare they?
How dare they? Day two, I stepped on one of Leo's toys, but I stepped on it when my other foot was already off the ground and I just went down hard. Like my ankle was toast. For
you
like
rolled it, right?
I rolled it and then I stood up and I'm like, oh, it doesn't hurt at all. This is great. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, this is not great. So yeah, that really hurt. But then one day, and I don't know what happened, I'm going to assume that it was a jellyfish, but all of my toes and just my toes were so like swollen and painful and all red and stinging. Like it was horrible. And I showed my mom and she's like, it's just a sunburn. And I was like, Mom, I've had sunburns my whole life. Like this is not a sunburn. So we never really figured out what it was because the thing is like, I would wake up and it would be not quite as red. And then we'd go back in the beach or the water and it would flare up again and get all inflamed. And then by, I think the fourth day of this, I had blisters all over my toe and they hurt.
I think I got that jellyfish thing on my right knee at one point because it started to sting a lot when I was out there, but it didn't look red and it didn't blister. And then 20 minutes later, it was fine. I think it actually tanned more.
Great for you. That's fantastic. While I'm in pain and sleeping next to our son who's kicking me all night with my sunburns.
I was made for that beach life. I don't know. Hashtag toes in the sand.
Hashtag toes in the sand.